Hello, this is Tim Hickson. I'm presenting my edited version of the North Broward Preparatory School Responsible Use Guidelines, which is what they call their acceptable use guidelines. Um, First of all, the thing to understand about this document is that it's actually part of the Student Parent Handbook. And this is actually one of the first things that I would change, not that it's in there, but the fact that this is really the only location that it's in. Right now it's an appendix, and I don't think that that really draws the appropriate amount of attention to it as it really deserves. Just to give an overview of the whole thing, there's first of all a number of guidelines that apply to all students from the pre-K through the 12th grade. And then later on there are some specific guidelines specifically designed for upper school students who are using it in a more independent fashion. The elementary school are constantly using it under the guidance of a teacher. But once they get to middle and high school, they're using it much more independently. So that half of this really applies just to them and has some specific guidelines for them. One thing that I changed right off the bat is there's a comment here that basically says, my student and I are committed to the responsible use guidelines, and by signing this we commit to discussing and reviewing the following guidelines as it pertains to technology use throughout the school. They had it right here at the beginning, yet there actually was no place in the entire document for parents to sign, and that's kind of a statement from the parents, but then it automatically switched to our staff and students kind of as a message from the school. So what I actually did is, if we go all the way down to the bottom here, I made this last page, which they called the acknowledgement form, an actual acknowledgement form. I felt like that whole statement went much better here. I indicated that they were supposed to complete this and return it to the school office. And part of doing that is I actually added places for both the student and the parents to sign and then return it back so that the office would have record that even if we know human nature, even if they didn't even read it, they're at least here acknowledging that this document exists, and they're placing themselves in a position of being responsible to the document, whether they took the time to read it or not. So I felt like that was important. While we're on this page, I did use this opportunity to reinforce the idea of the fact that while using the school resources, they have no expectation of privacy. The students at the school know that their emails, their browsing, the stuff that they save in their Google Drives, all of that is available for observation by their teachers and or technology staff at any time. So that adds a level of accountability. So I kind of divided up my editing of this document into two categories. One was kind of the structure of it, and in all of this editing, most of the ideas I got were from the Willard article, Choosing Not to Go Down the Not So Good Cyber Streets, and also the Cromwell article, Getting Started on the Internet, Developing an AUP. So the structural ideas, first of all, we have this structural idea of making the actual acknowledgement form and also making this document a standalone document, not just an appendix to a parent handbook, in order to draw the proper attention to it. So that was the main thing with structure. And then later on, really acknowledging the fact that this section here, we have additional guidelines for the upper school students. kind of drawing their attention to that. One other minor thing related to structure is just, this whole section was in a big paragraph, so I made it a bulleted list to make it clearer and easier to read. So, onto the actual changes in content. And I also wanted to emphasize a few things about the content that were already quite good. First of all, just kind of pointing out some of the different features of a good acceptable use policy that were in the reading. This first section here, the first half of this first paragraph, is really a good example of a preamble, giving why the policy is needed and what the main goal of the policy is. Also at the end here is another good example of an element of a preamble where it's saying that the normal, what our school calls the honor code, applies to using technology as well. And the 4 pillars there: respect for academic honesty, respect for others, respect for property, and respect for myself. Those things apply to the use of technology, with plagiarism and that sort of thing, and acknowledging sources and honesty, the digital citizenship, and the issues with cyberbullying as far as the respect for others, respect for property and not trying to hack or steal other people's information or damage the infrastructure of the network, and also respect for themselves, teaching them how to present themselves in a good way. I thought those were good elements. And I added these elements to the original document to make this a little bit more of a complete preamble here. Another thing is, in this first paragraph here, it gives kind of the scope of the services that are covered by this. And basically, the scope is anything connected, anything owned by the school, and anything connected to the North Broward computer network is covered. And it says whether they be student-owned or otherwise, all devices fall into this. So there's no, really no way to get around the ideas sent here. Okay. Another element that was in our reading was this section on definitions. Here they specifically define internet, and I thought that was significant. While everyone kind of knows what the internet is in general, defining it like this, a network of many types of communication information networks, just kind of explains a little bit of the complexity of the situation that the school finds themselves in, and trying to filter some content, but acknowledging that this is a very complex issue and no system is perfect. Another thing with the definitions is these terms here, they have individual sections later on where these are defined very clearly, and guidelines are given as to how each of these can be exercised within the network. Okay. Here we have the responsible use guidelines, and they're defining responsible use, mainly for educational. Limited personal use is permitted. It furthers educational and administrative purposes, using your own account, and some other things. Doesn't violate student code of conduct. Again, we have that in there. Using appropriate names, polite language. All of these things were things that existed in both articles. One thing I did add here, since parents would be reading this, they can understand a little more of the scope of and the accountability that is there for the elementary students. The use actually is always supervised by either teachers or it's done right in the library, the media center, and the staff is present. So they really do a good job of watching over the young ones as they're teaching them these concepts of digital citizenship. The next section they have here is unacceptable and irresponsible use. So they define this positively, and now they're defining the negative. And in this, they explain the disciplinary action that may be taken, and they'll explain that in detail in the next section. They talk about copyright, violating licensing agreements, the actual content of what people are posting is important. Disrupting education with technology, encouraging illegal behavior, threatening school safety, and then they also talk about keeping social media policy, or keeping information private. And while they deal with this more so in the upper school, more detailed area, it's here even for the younger ones. Basically saying this applies to everyone, your personal information. Also different things, not using it for political purposes or recruiting, not trying to bypass filtering systems, not trying to destroy or disable equipment. Again, basically just staying within the bounds that are set. Again, posting personal information, forging emails. Again, you see the code of conduct here, and even just wasting school resources, taking up bandwidth through nonsense and worthless things. Then you have this list of consequences. And one thing I felt was lacking here was an indication of due process. So I added this statement here: after an alleged violation of the RUG, an investigation will be carried out by the administration, including a meeting with the student and or their parents. So here it's laying out the process. It's not just going to be a snap judgment. There will be an investigation, and then if a student's found in violation, these consequences can be imposed. So now we get to the additional guidelines for upper school students, and I already mentioned here bulleting these, communicating safely, security and information. This is one area where I felt like they needed some further clarity. And I chose to include here specific examples. Their students will not share any of their passwords, of course, but also their own personal information, including address, phone number, social security number, etc., unless under the advice of parents or school staff for the purpose of registering. Our college advising staff helps students register for ACT and SAT, also complete their college applications or scholarship applications, and also showing them what to look for secure connections before transferring any information like that. But also, of course, never giving out other people's information under any circumstances. And then also inappropriate photos or videos, here just dealing with the content. But that is letting them know that that is an element of security as well. They do emphasize privacy, and I felt like this was dealt with pretty well already. Okay. So then we get into the category of digital citizenship. Again, here it defines it very well. Talks about social media and email quite a bit. Again, here all email can be viewed by teachers, administrators, or parents. So again, no expectation of privacy here. And then commenting responsibly, and I felt like this could use some additional explanation. It talks about the importance of commenting responsibly, but one of the things as we develop critical thinkers, I wanted to make sure that we emphasized how to think critically while being respectful. It's particularly important to show respect when writing comments that oppose the viewpoint of the original post. Critical evaluation of ideas is an important part of growing as learners. However, students must ensure that they present their opposing viewpoint without attacking the author personally. Authors in these circumstances should receive constructive criticism graciously, consider and evaluate the opposing viewpoint, and respond, if necessary, with the same level of respect they desire from others. So again, this all goes under digital citizenship. How do we interact even with people that we don't agree? Both as we point out the fact that we don't agree and as someone points out to us that they disagree with us. How do we respond graciously and respectfully and really deal with the argument at hand rather than attacking people? So I thought that would have been a good addition there. Another thing here under digital ethics, I wanted to emphasize again citing sources. They talk about copyright and Creative Commons laws, but citing their sources is important as well. So there is a section here on cheating, cyberbullying, which were all, I felt, done very well. Again, talking about self-expression, again, encouraging kids to just be who they are rather than having this kind of second life online. And then the last section here before the acknowledgement form was this part on research and information literacy. And this is another area where I felt we could expand a little bit and explain better. It talks about searching and using search engines to gather information and understanding how to do this. And this is one of the things that they're taught throughout their curriculum. But under the research and evaluation, I felt this was a good opportunity to kind of deal with the balance between censorship and filtering. Talking about choosing websites with high quality information, using multiple sources, but and also properly citing them. But then also in the process of doing research on various topics, it is possible students will come across sensitive topics or viewpoints that are radical in one way or another. In other words, if they're studying about what's happening in the Middle East, or they're researching about ISIS or something like that, they're going to come across radical and possibly even recruiting kind of language or content. And while we have to be careful with that, I made the comment here, we believe in filtering certain objectionable content. However, some exposure to this information, along with the guidance of teachers, staff, and parents, can help students think critically about the various people groups and ideologies and develop discernment when reading and viewing information on the internet. Okay, I wanted to show this balance between filtering and censorship because the desire of the school is to develop critical thinkers and develop discernment. And if they're never exposed to any of it, then they'll never learn that discernment. But here, with the guidance of teachers, staff, and I point out the parents have to be involved too. We can help students and teach them to discern from what they're reading, look at the source, look at what's being said, evaluate it critically, and then come to valid conclusions as a result. So I thought that was really important as well. The last thing here is also talking about storage and just responsibly using that storage. Every student from grade 3 through 12 at North Broward has their own Gmail account through the school's domain at mynbps.org. Teachers have them, students have them. And with that comes an unlimited amount of storage. And yet they are also encouraged here to use that appropriately. Just because they have a ton of storage doesn't mean that they should just be downloading all kinds of garbage. Also, emphasizing again appropriate content, following copyright laws, and remembering that there is no expectation of privacy. And everything stored in those drives should be dealt with keeping these things in mind. Alright, so overall I felt this was a good document, but some structural and content things could be improved to make it one that was really even more valuable and would be even more valuable to the school.